ठीक है, थैंक यू. Thank you, madam, and good afternoon to everybody once again. Yesterday, if you recall, there were two sessions. The first one was on public procurement, and the second one was on procurement procedure in government departments. So we had finished those two sessions yesterday, and today's session is on contract management. Why I said you please recall those two sessions is because whatever we are going to discuss today in this session will take a lot of cues from there. It has got public procurement content in it. It has got the procedure content in it. The only difference will be in some terminology that we use in managing the contracts. So again, the ground rule would be same. First, I will go through the slides, and in between, I would like to request you people to remain muted. And then towards the end of the session, there would be question answer session. So let me first start with the slides. So this is the first slide on contract management. And before we go through in details, let's have what will be the roadmap for today's discussion. First, we'll spend a few minutes on definition of contract and look for a minute what are the types of contract, then contract management definition. Today's topic is basically contract management. Then what is the contracting procedure? And then the most important thing would be we'll be discussing important terms and definitions that are used exclusively in contract management. And then there are something like general conditions or special conditions contract, often called as GCC and STC. Then finally, we will have contract execution or contract management. And then finally, something on your audit. So with this content roadmap, let's start with the definition of contract. I hope I am audible to all. I am otherwise also, I speak a little louder. Anyway, what is a contract? 2-3 key words are here, or key terms are here. Yesterday, we went through public procurement and then we defined what is procurement. Now, is there any difference between procurement and contract? I say no difference. Procurement, when in procurement, contract is a contract. What we procure is also through a contract. So yesterday we talked about procurement as such, but today we are discussing about a procedure where we are using the term contract. In procurement too, you will see that there is a written agreement between two parties. One is a buyer, the procurer, the purchaser, and another is a supplier. These two come into an agreement and the document is called purchase order. So the concept remains the same, with the only difference being that we'll be discussing those concepts and those terminologies here. So a contract is a written agreement between two parties for supply of goods or execution of works, or a promise to do so for consideration paid or payable in future. This is a little bit legal language, but in this legal language you will find two terminologies very important. First is written agreement. But I say that even if an agreement is not in writing, it can be a contract. Agreement is a contract in itself. But legally, when that agreement follows the laws of the land, then only it
मेरा
will
वो
be.
करवाया होगा इसमें सेल ट्रेनिंग पे.
Hello, there is some. Hello, kindly mute. Kindly mute yourself. So a contract is a written agreement between two parties for supply of goods or execution of works, or a promise to do so for consideration paid or payable in future. This means this is a written agreement between two parties, one being the purchaser, the other being the supplier. And second, both have got an interest in it. The purchaser has the interest of getting the goods, materials, or execution of some work which he wants, whereas the man who is supplying or executing that work has got an interest in, he is doing a business for which he will be paid some money, or maybe in lieu of money, something else he will get. So there is a consideration for the person, for the party, which is providing that good or service, and to that party which is buying, because he is getting that goods or getting that work executed. So it's a written agreement between two parties. Now a contract is a legally binding agreement that defines and governs the rights and duties between or among its parties. Naturally, every contract is legally enforceable, provided it meets the requirement of the law. We'll see next. Another definition says a contract is legally enforceable when it meets the requirement of applicable law. Now, this is very important. Important in the sense, two persons can always have a contract. But if that contract is not fulfilling the applicability of law, some points which are required by the law to make it a contract, then it's called sham contract. Sham contract meant a contract which cannot be enforced in the court of law. It's a bad contract. Therefore, the contract has to fulfill the requirements of applicable law of the land. A contract typically involves the exchange of goods, services, money, or a promise of any of those. We have already seen that in the previous slide. Based on this primary concept of contract, the main, you can see the concept. Then Indian Contract Act is also there. In India also there is a definition of contract based on just these two what we have discussed. Indian Contract Act was enacted in 1872 and it defines the term contract under section 2H as an agreement enforceable by law. We have already seen that. In other words, we can say that a contract is anything that is an agreement and enforceable by the law of the land. Means agreement to hai, this is an agreement, but it must fulfill the requirement of the law of the land so that it can be enforced by the law of the land. Then only it becomes a valid contract. A valid contract is enforceable by the law of the land. But any contract can be there as per the mutual agreement between two or more than two parties. So you will see that this definition has two major elements in it: agreement and enforceable by law. I think it should be clear by now. So this is the definition of contract. As we go further, we'll further discuss it. Let's see what are the types of contract. A contract can be of many types. But the contract that we usually discuss, the primary types of contract, and those contracts are usually executed in government departments, whether it be a just a service department or a say industry. We have almost two types of contract fixed for us. One is the supply contract. Yesterday we discussed a lot about purchase, procurement. So that comes under supply contract. Every purchase order that we place is a supply contract. it has to fulfill many terms and conditions which are applicable as per the law of the land, and therefore those purchase orders are enforceable in the court of law, enforceable by the law. So those are called supply contracts or material contracts. These are merely for supply of material. Once the material has been supplied, the contract obligations by the party has been fulfilled. And after that, once we make the payment to the party, the entire contract is over, and the entire obligations of both the parties are over. Another contract is works contract. So works contract is, as you know, for carrying out specific jobs that may need using man, machine, and material. And yesterday we talked about building some rooms, or maybe building the whole, getting a whole building constructed. So these all will come under works contract. And works contracts are usually big contracts and time-taking contracts. And most of the terms and conditions over here that we'll be discussing pertain to works contract. Then we have very frequently used contracts which are called rate or quantity contract. Rate contract is a contract by which we fix the rate of an item, and that rate may be valid for a period of at least 1 year, 6 months, or 2 years, depending upon the agreement between the two parties. In some places, there are quantity contract. We may very broadly give a time frame of say 2 years. Within 2 years, we will be buying so much of quantity from you. So that will be called quantity contract. But normally the quantity contract, the word you will not hear anywhere. It is mostly rate contract. And then these have also two types. First is fixed rate contract. Fixed rate contract means obviously the rate is fixed for the given period of time and even for the quantity, given quantity. Second is cost plus. There are contracts where there can be an agreement between the two parties saying that you do this job, and whatever is your cost, you bear this cost, we'll pay you that cost plus your profit. So this cost called cost plus contracts. There are other contracts also, but we are limiting ourselves to these contracts only for our discussion, because these are the only contracts which are used in majority of the places. And most of you may have come across only these contracts. So these are the types of contract. Terms and conditions which are used for these contracts are more or less same, but depending upon a particular contract, the terms and conditions may vary also, and these things we'll be discussing. Now, after we have discussed the types of contract, what is contract management? When the word management comes, it means there is a process which has got a start time, a start point, and end point. So management means you have to manage everything that comes in between the start point and the end point. So this itself is a process. So a contract management is the process of managing agreements. Agreements means whatever that party has to do, party has to fulfill its own obligations. And as a purchaser, I have got many obligations to fulfill. So both have to, both combine together are agreements between me and the party, and both have to fulfill their respective obligations. Naturally, then this is the process of managing agreements from their creation, means start point, through to their execution by the chosen parties, and to the eventual termination of the contract, means end point. From start to end, how the job has to be done completely, when this is managed, this is called contract management. In some places, and here also, we may call it contract execution. Basically, when the contract is executed, it is managed also. So contract management or contract execution are more or less same things. We will be discussing it little later. Another definition of contract management is it is managing progress or execution of a contract to ensure timely completion of all the specified jobs and work as per the terms and conditions incorporated in the contract. So this is what we saw here also, that is the process of managing agreements from their creation through to their execution by the chosen parties and to the eventual termination of the contract. So that is contract management. Now, let's discuss something about contracting procedure. The contract management or contract execution will come later. Prior to that is contracting. How do we enter into a contract with a party? Now, why I said that, please recall the 2 sessions we had yesterday on public procurement and also on purchase or procurement procedure. The contracting procedure is same. The contracting procedure is same as what we discussed yesterday as procurement procedure. We do the similar kind of activities here also with some changes, some variations, something like that. So before going into these 10 points, let me show you the graph, the pictorial depiction that we did yesterday. Let us see it again. Here it was procurement and it was giving procurement cycle. In place of procurement, we can write here as contract and then it again becomes the contracting cycle. But there is some difference. In procurement, usually we procure if every year there is a timing of procurement activities over there, because suppose you are running a big industry, a big factory where manufacturing is going on, then naturally you will be needing the materials to be used there, and that need of the material is a very constant kind of a need, always needed. Therefore, procurement has a cycle. In contract also, the same is true if you are doing those service contracts which are also needed on daily basis. For example, in a building, you need cleaning contract. You need some electricity maintenance contract, because every time this will be required. But in some contracts, some works particularly, the contract may be one time. For example, I have to get a building constructed. So every day I am not going to get a building. I have to get a building constructed, and therefore that building once constructed, the job is over, and then I may not be needing another building for the next 25 years. So although procedure is same, but in works contract, the repeatability of the same job may not be there. But there may be some other works for which a contract has to be entered into. So here also, if you see, the same thing goes on, that timely determination of requirement has to be there. While we are discussing contract management, we are discussing works as well as service. So to repeat, works contract may not be repeated. You get a job done and that job may not be repeated in near future. But contract management also has services under it. A service you may be getting every day, you may be needing every day. Therefore, the service contract may always be repeated, rather it is repeated. That is why, while you are contracting, like procurement planning, you have to do the contract planning also at the beginning of the year, beginning of this financial year. So somebody has to do this timely determination of requirements of works or services, because it all takes time. Therefore, there has to be a time for making a plan also. Otherwise, you will not get those services on time. So I am not going to explain each and every step because we have already done it yesterday. But I am only saying that the procedure remains same, that requirement is there and somebody will arrange the fund for that, and then finalization of technical specification, commercial conditions, which we did in purchase also yesterday. Then mode of bidding like open tendering, limited tendering, nomination or single tender. In fact, nomination is also called single tender, that we discussed yesterday in details. Both are same. And then some type of bidding, single stage, single envelope, single stage, two envelope, two stage, something like that. Bid is submitted, bid is evaluated. Finally, price bid is opened. The lowest price contractor is awarded with the contract, something like that. Then contract monitoring or follow-up is there, just like in purchase. And then finally, whatever the contractor is given to us after building, say a building or some service, that is inspected and finally accepted if it is acceptable, and then accordingly the invoice verification is done and payment is made. So the whole cycle of contract is the same as the cycle of procurement. In very commercial language, commercial and legal language, contract and purchase both are same. Every purchase order is a contract order. So the procedure remains the same in any government department. Therefore, having seen this, let us go and read one by one. No explanation is needed right now. If somebody has got any question over this, because most of the questions were asked on it yesterday itself and answered itself, but even then, if there is any question, we'll be attempting those questions towards the end. So the procedure remains the same. Required service over planning has to be done. Freezing exact requirement. Then you have to prepare estimates. Then you have to raise the requirement requisition, which is called indent, or purchase requisition, or contract requisition. Then we go into the tendering mode, single or limited tender, or maybe open tender, maybe global tender, as I said. Then the tenders can be in single, 2 or 3 bids. Similarly, when later on, when we get the tender on the tender day, then we receive, open and evaluate the tenders. After that, the price bid is opened and price comparison is done. And then we arrive at the L1 price. Then afterwards, contract proposal is made and the due approvals from higher ups is taken up depending upon the delegation of power. And finally, the contract is awarded. Obviously, when the contract has started, then its service or work progress is monitored as per terms and conditions of the contract. And finally, after everything has been completed and handed over to us, we make the payment to contractor as per payment terms. In fact, it is not necessary that payment will be made to the contractor only after he has completed the entire job. Payment in work contracts and services are made periodically, or maybe depending on completion of certain milestones. For example, if a building is getting constructed, then it is quite possible that you may ask the supplier or contractor may ask for the first payment after the foundation has been laid, after the plinth area has been completed, or the first floor has been completed. So you have to give part payment at that stage. So this is called progressive payment or stage-wise payment, or that stage-wise, or some people also call it milestone-based payments. Means you complete certain milestones and then your payment will be released. I mean part payment only. So that is how the contracting procedure goes about. And then if you are seeing it, it is the same as we did yesterday in procurement procedure. Both are same. The changes are only with respect to certain terminology, which we have to understand here. So let's get into the terminology part. Important terms and their definitions. What is a contract? We have already seen. But now, in practical terms, what happens? This contract agreement entered into between the employer and the contractor. Employer means purchaser. The person or the entity or the organization which is getting the job done through a contractor, it is called employer here. And contractor is contractor, you know. So contract agreement entered into between the employer and the contractor, together with the contract documents, constitute the contract. In practical terms, contract documents are exchanged after finalizing between contractor and employer. One copy is kept by the contractor, one copy is kept by the employer. In fact, 9 or 10 copies are made. One is given to finance, one is given to some executing authority. It happens. So this is a document. Contract is in the form of a document. And this document may be quite bulky. Maybe 100 pages, maybe 1,000 pages, maybe 5,000 pages. So that happens. So a contract is made. Now, another term, technical specifications or contract technical specifications. Technical specifications does not mean necessarily physics, chemistry, or math. I mean, it is not engineering necessarily. But technical and commercial specifications are segregated only to say that commercials are payment terms, delivery period, etc., whereas technical are the specifications against which something is going to be constructed. The measurements, all these things are called technical specifications. So here the technical specifications schedules when what will be completed, detailed designs, statements of technical data, performance characteristics, value, and all other technical particulars of the contract, they are kept there. In fact, the whole contract is divided into several parts, and one part remains, which is often called as technical part or technical specification part. It means what contractor has to really perform. And another part is the commercial part, where like payment terms, delivery, submission of so many licenses, so many permissions by the contractor, all these things are there. And the obligations of the employer also, means purchaser. Then contractor, you can understand, but what is contractor? The person, yeah, some clarity is needed here. Kindly listen. The person whose bid to perform the contract has been accepted. I mean the L1 person, the lowest offering party, is the contractor. Straight. The person whose bid to perform the contract has been accepted by the employer and is named as such in the contract agreement. Means in the contract agreement, to whom you will name the person, the contractor. He has got the contract, Mr. X has got the contract. So obviously, in the contract agreement or the contract document, the name and address of that party will appear. So the person whose bid to perform the contract has been accepted by the employer and is named as such in the contract agreement and includes the legal successors or permitted assigns of the contractor. I mean, it's a legal document. Therefore, not only the person who has come into contract, in fact, an entity comes into contract, does the contract. If we are a party, we are a big party, then the contractor may also be a big party. They may be also having a big company. So legally, that company's name will be there, not a person's name. Obviously, if the person executing the contract at that time, if he leaves the company, if he dies, if he is no more there, then the contract does not end. The contract is being executed by his company. So his company will exist. People will be there. That is the meaning of here, that legal successors or permitted assigns of the contractor. In case contract is with consortium, also pronounced as consortium or consortium, of 2 or more members, then the contractor shall mean 1 or more members of consortium, as the case may be. In fact, in some contracts, what happened? Bigger contracts, very big contracts, thousands of crores and so, everything cannot be done by one company. So what the companies usually do in big and mega contracts, they form a consortium of 2, 3, 4, 5 different kinds of contractors, depending upon the core activity done by those contractors. One may be electrical contractor, say, one may be civil contractor, one may be doing hydraulics, one may be doing transportation, one may be doing so many other things. So all those things are their primary activity, but no one contractor is doing all these activities. But yet one contractor may be taking up the biggest chunk of that contract. So he usually is called the leader of the consortium. He is leader of the consortium. But consortium means all those parties are together and the contract is awarded to all those parties with one leader of consortium, and those parties get the contract depending upon their core activities. I mean, they will have to do only those activities. But combined together, they produce the final result for which the contract has been awarded. You see, for example, in India, in so many places, the metro projects are coming. Already they have come in so many places, but they are also coming in some other places. So metro project is not done by one company. It is often a consortium, because thousands of jobs are there, all big jobs are there, and this project also has a cost of more than 50,000 crores, 60,000 crores, something like that. So it cannot be done by one party. That is why they form a consortium of national and international parties, and then they get the contract. And other parties, their competitors, they are also forming consortium with other parties. So that is why we say that whether the contractor is one whose bid has been accepted either as a single contractor or in a consortium. That is how the word consortium has come. Next, let's move on to contractor's representative. See what happens when the contract has been entered into and the execution is starting. Then contractor is a party whom you will go and ask, with whom you will discuss. A contractor, a party, when entering into a contract, will send his marketing people, his commercial people, his purchase people, his sales people for entering into a contract. But once the contract has been entered into, finalized, and the documents have been prepared and exchanged, then those agencies of that party, they have no further role to play. Then who plays the role on their behalf is their execution, works department. They might be having a team who is doing the job on the side. So you need to know who is the representative of the contractor when the execution starts. That is why we call it a person nominated by the contractor and approved by the employer. So this person who comes to us, who will interact with us from now onwards, has to be named so by the contractor. That Mr. So-and-so, who is the vice president or maybe the executive director or maybe something like that of our company, looking after works, looking after execution of contract, is nominated from our side, and from now onwards he will be in touch with you. So that is called contractor's representative. When the work starts, we need to know who is going to represent them. So hereof to perform the duties delegated by the contractor. For site work, contractor's representative shall also mean the representative of subcontractors and subcontractors. Let us see who is subcontractor. We have already seen who is contractor. Now a subcontractor technically happens to be the contractor of the contractor. The contractor also may like to delegate some of its job to some other smaller contractors. And that entire contract procedure or contracting is done by the contractor also. They just have to inform that these are the items or these are the activities or these are the jobs which they are not going to perform directly, but on their behalf some other contractors will perform, and they will take care of that entire, that contractor. Whatever money we are going to pay to the main contractor, that will be the only money to be paid to the contractor, which we have agreed mutually. Now, what money the contractor will pay to his contractor, that is none of our business to know. But subcontractor also is a legal entity. In some cases, it may just happen that the main contractor has run away from his responsibilities, and without making any payment to the subcontractor who has already done some jobs. So where will the subcontractor go? He has done my job after all on behalf of that contractor, but the main contractor has gone away. So subcontractor has got a right to come to me and ask for the payment because he has done my job, some job, whatever job he has done. Therefore, subcontractor is a very prevalent term in the realm of contracts or work contracts or even service contracts. This is one identity which has to be recognized if it arises at that point of time. So this includes vendors, means any person to whom execution of any part of the facilities, including preparation of any design or supply of any plant and equipment is subcontracted directly or indirectly by the main contractor. And therefore, for subcontractor also includes its legal successors or permitted assigns. I mean, this subcontracting party also happens to be a big party, a big company, a legal entity. Therefore, that company itself is a subcontractor, and therefore all those successors and permitted assigns, they will form part of the subcontractor. So we have seen the contractor, we have seen the subcontractor. So just please remember, the subcontracting is not illegal. What happens usually, a contractor makes some subcontractor. He also awards some part contract to some other people. But in some cases what happens, he does so without informing us. We are the employer, we are the purchaser. In our land or on our land, in our premises, he will carry out the jobs. But we do not know that the main contractor has delegated some of the things to his subcontractor. Therefore, it is necessary that the contractor takes the permission from us first, that he is going for a subcontract for these things, and these are our subcontractors. And then only we will issue the gate pass and other things to the subcontractor people. And as I said, in some very unfortunate circumstances, the main contractor has run away. He is not doing the job, whereas the subcontractor has done some part job and he has not been paid by the main contractor who has run away. So in that case, it is our legal duty, ethical duty also, to make the payment to the subcontractor, depending upon what work he has done and whether it has been accepted by us or not. All those things will be applicable there. That is why subcontractor is also a very important entity in the entire execution of the work. Facilities. What is a facility? In fact, basically, in terms of contracts, the specified work which the contractor has to do, that is called facility. But that facility has to be created by the contractor after the work has been completed. I mean, he is in the process of creating a facility. So the work is specified in technical specification, including general technical specification and all supply and services to be carried out by the contractor under the contract. His entire scope of supply, that brings out, that gets converted into facilities. Suppose we are getting a building constructed. So some specifications have been given to the contractor. Some lot of specifications have been given to the contractor. Once the building is constructed, that means these are that becomes a facility, and that has been handed over to us by the contractor. So that is called a facility. Next is installation services. In every contract, it is very clearly specified as to who will be doing the installation. In fact, in 99.9999% cases, the installation has to be done by the contractor. I have not seen a contract where there is a contract without installation. The installation is in the full scope of the contractor. So but let's see what is installation service. All those services ancillary to the supply of plant and equipment for the facilities to be provided by the contractor under the contract. That is the punchline here. It has to be provided by the contractor under the contract, which normally is design engineering, supervision work, customs and port clearance for the material which is coming, loading and unloading of material, dismantling and modification, and intermediate storage, transportation and provision of insurance, inspection, site preparation, installation, testing, commissioning, demonstration of performance guarantees, test, training, etc. All these things will come under installation services. All these things. I mean, these are the services which are starting from design engineering and ending at training of my people, means the employer's people. Suppose we have taken, I have given an example of only constructing a building. But let's say we have got a very big plant and machinery constructed. We have awarded a contract for getting a plant. Obviously, the person will do, the contractor will do entire design engineering, supervision, everything. And finally, when he's about to leave, he will train my people as to how to run this plant. So from starting to end, the entire job has to be done by him, and this comes under installation services. All these services he has to perform, he has to do. Then let's say what is contractor's equipment. All plant equipment, machinery, tools, apparatus, appliances or things of every kind required in or for installation, completion and maintenance of facilities that are to be provided by the contractor. This has to be given by the contractor. That is called contractor's equipment. But it is not that plant and equipment which the contractor has to erect and give it to us. In fact, in other words, I can say, to make things simpler for you, whatever tools and tackles, etc., are needed to construct my plant or my building, all those things contractor will bring. But those won't form the part of my building or my plant. After my building is handed over by the contractor or the plant is handed over by the contractor, all those equipment that contractor has brought to build, he will take it back. It is his property. So that is called contractor's equipment. He has brought his equipment to do my job. After my job has been done, he will take back his equipment. Site. As you know, it's very easy, but site is that place where the facilities are to be installed. Facilities we discussed here. The work specified in technical specification, I mean the work which the contractor has to do. These are called facilities, and where these facilities are to be installed, that is called site. For example, if I am getting a land building constructed, then obviously I have given my land to the contractor for building, giving a big building to us, or maybe a big plant to us. So the entire land is mine. Or if entire land is mine, then where on which he is going to erect the facilities, then that land is called the site. Simply put it, this is the place where the work is being done. That's all. That is called site. And this is referred to in most of the correspondences also between employer and the contractor. When the execution starts, a lot many letters are to be written to the contractor for delays and other things, for safety of his equipment and so many things. So every time we refer the site that your material has not come to the site, your equipment is not available on the site, your people are not available on the site, they have run away or what is there. You said that you will be employing nearly 500 people for construction activities, but today morning when I visited and inspected the site, I found there were only 10 persons. So your persons were not on the site. So every time this word site will come into reference during the execution of the contract. And site means my place, that's all, where the job is to be done. Next, let's move on to effective date of contract. It's very easy. The date of signing of contract normally is considered to be the effective date of contract or otherwise specified. Let's say here we are saying the date of signing of contract or 30 days from date of letter of acceptance, whichever is earlier. What happens? The contract document being very bulky and huge takes time for typing, proofreading and so many other things. But before that, what can happen is that everything is okay. We have determined the L1 bidder. We have already got all our approvals for placement of order on this contractor, but it will take some 30 days or 40 days or 50 days time to give a full contract, because the contract document may run into thousands of pages. It will take some time. So what we issue at that point of time is called letter of acceptance. Letter of acceptance. I mean, we will give the contractor a 1 or 2 page kind of a letter saying that please refer to your offer number so and so, our discussion so and so, our so and so, your so and so, and finally we are pleased to award this contract to you. you can straightway start mobilizing your resources for the work. So we can say at that point of time that your work effective date of contract starts from the date of LOA. Understand? That is why contract date is of paramount importance. All the problems that take place and for which you people, you auditors ask a lot many questions, they are mostly regarding delay in contracts, delay in execution. So delay means what? Which reference date is there? So reference date is always either the date of signing of the contract or 30 days from the date of letter of acceptance. This 30 days I have written just like that. It can be 15 days, it can be 7 days, it can be 45 days, it can be 2 months, 60 days, depending upon what we want to do, what we want, what kind of contract is there. Or maybe the supplier also says something, the contractor can say, you give me 45 days to start, and we will take it as the date of contract. It happens. But date of contract is of paramount importance because all delays considered are from this reference date only. The party's LD, liquidated damage, has to be deducted, or some penal action has to be taken against the party. All these things are done considering this date only. This is the date of signing of contract, or maybe LOA. Time for completion, obviously the time is specified in the contract agreement within which completion of the facilities as a whole is to be attained in accordance with the stipulations made in the contract agreement and the relevant provisions of the contract. So time for completion means today I am awarding this contract to you and you have to complete the entire thing, say within a period of 1 year or 2 years, something like that. That is called time for completion. And this again, I say, is very, very important kind of a date, important kind of a term. These are the things which produce a lot of legal troubles after some time if not clearly mentioned. And I say everybody mentions it very, very, very clearly. There's absolutely no two opinions about that. But these are very, very important. Now, preliminary acceptance of the facilities. These are the terminologies we are discussing because in any contract, you will find the mention of all these terms. But in purchase orders, which we discussed yesterday, these terms are not required, although some of the terms are required. Even in purchase order, you need to have an effective date of purchase order. I mean, the day on which the purchase order is placed is the day of reckoning. Similarly, there has to be a time for completion. I mean, your entire supply has to be completed within 2 months of this order, within 4 months of this order. So time for completion is also there. As I said, purchase document is nothing but a document of contract. But so many things don't come there because so many things are not required in a supply contract. And now, for example, preliminary acceptance of the facilities, it is not required in purchase order. But here, what is the meaning of preliminary acceptance of the facilities? The facilities have been completed operationally and structurally and put in a tight and clean condition, and that all work in respect of pre-commissioning of the facilities have been completed. Then it is called preliminary. In other words, the facilities are fit for startup and commissioning, but they have not been started. They are yet to be started. Pre-starting phase, but everything has been completed. So that will be called preliminary acceptance of the facilities. Now, it will not be just that way accepted. Preliminary acceptance test has to be there. PAT. Here I am writing preliminary acceptance certificate. Okay, but preliminary acceptance certificate means preliminary acceptance test has been carried out, on the basis of which a certificate is being produced. So the certificate to be issued by the employer on successful completion of preliminary acceptance test. What happened and what may happen? Suppose we have gone for preliminary acceptance of the facilities, which is about to be started. So the contractor will say, as per the terms of the contract, that look, gentlemen, come here. From my side, I have completed my job. Everything is fine. You can test it. So we go and we test. we conduct some tests here and there in the, I mean, we go very minutely and look into every aspect of that. Maybe, in our opinion, some of the things are not ready to start. Some of the things require replacement. Some of the things require further doing something. So in that case, we will not be issuing this preliminary acceptance certificate. At that stage, we will be giving a list of jobs which are yet to be done or which should be done in a better manner. I mean, this is not complete in my opinion. You have to redo it, something like that. And the party may say that, okay, give me 1 month time or 2 months time to do it. So we have to give that. After doing that, we may again go and again do the preliminary acceptance test. Suppose in the preliminary acceptance test, everything is found to be okay, then finally we issue the preliminary acceptance certificate to the party. So this certificate is to be issued by the employer on successful completion of preliminary acceptance test. In fact, this is a major milestone in the entire execution of the project or contract, because after this, the party is paid some money, some very substantial money is paid to the party as per the payment term. So that is why PAC or PAT, whatever you call, is very, very, very important. Commissioning. Now we have conducted the preliminary acceptance test, means before they start. Therefore, once it is okay, now we will start, means commissioning. We will start the operation of the facilities by the contractor to a level of output. I mean, level of output means we had said that the purpose of getting this entire facility is production of certain things. That will be the output. So after commissioning, we want to see whether that output is coming or not. So that process through which it is coming, I mean, running of machines or running the operation, is called commissioning. We say that the facility has been commissioned, but whether it has been commissioned successfully or not, this is again seen, and maybe at that time also there may be some problems. So the party has to rectify those things, and then again we have to go for commissioning, and then finally the commissioning takes place. And once the commissioning takes place, we have to issue commissioning certificate. The certificate to be issued by the employer on completion of commissioning. Now, after the commissioning has been done, then what? We got this facility for getting some output, and that facility should have a performance parameter. That product has got a specification, the quality. So whether we are getting that or not, that has to be ascertained through performance guarantee test. Whatever performance guarantee was mutually agreed at the time of contract, this party has to show now. So certain tests already decided in advance, written in the contract, those tests have to be carried out, and then we have to see whether after the test, the whole facility, the plant, and whatever the product, whether that conforms to the performance we had mentioned in our contract or not. If not, then the problem starts. Then we have to give the party some time to conform to that performance. The party will say he will take 2 months time. There are some hiccups here and there. He has to rectify. We may have to give some time, and the party will come out with again, okay, now let's go again and see the performance. So this happens, and this is a very serious thing at time. I mean, it calls for a lot of discussion between the employer and the contractor for fixing the performance parameters. Otherwise, a lot of arbitration, court cases, they happen only because of this. So this is very, very important. But meaning is that the party, after doing all everything, has to show that his facility is conforming to the performance we had earlier mutually agreed. And that was the whole purpose of getting the entire facility constructed. We spent so much of money for what? Next, again, when the performance guarantee test has been conducted, and suppose it has been found to be okay, then we issue the certificate, and on the basis of that also party gets some payment. Final acceptance. This is the final. After performance guarantee certificate has been issued, means the entire facility has been commissioned to our satisfaction and the performance guarantee has been assured now. We have seen the performance guarantee fulfilling. Then we say that yes, the whole system, the whole facility is now finally accepted by me, and from tomorrow onwards, I will run the system. So at that stage, the final acceptance is is done, and for which the final acceptance certificate is issued by the employer. Defect liability period is something which is again a contract term, but it comes when during the time of preliminary acceptance. As I said, when we go for preliminary acceptance, it does not mean that everything has been completed to our satisfaction. There are certain defects lying over there. So a list is made mutually by contractor and employer, where contractor also agrees that these are the parts which are not conforming to the performance and other things, and these are the parts which are not functioning. All those things are there. So that is called a defect liability list. So the party has to fulfill, the party has to remove all those defects. So he will say that I will take 2 months, 3 months, or 4 months time, which again has to be granted by the employer. It has to be mutually agreed again. Okay, no, for 4 months to do it within 3 months, within two months, something like that. But both come to a time period. Okay, say 2 months. Okay, then that is called defect liability period. During this period, the contractor has to remove all the defects. So those were some of the very important terminologies used in awarding a contract, or they constitute the part of the contract document. But this is not the exhaustive list. This does not give you a complete list, but this certainly gives you the most important terms. The most important terms for which I have often seen many arbitration cases, many court cases, awards and penalties, so many things. So I thought them to put in my slides here and explain them. Next, very important again is something called general and special conditions of contract. In a contract, there are very general kinds of terms used. Conditions, I can say. Any company has got its own general conditions, which basically are drawn or called from the usual Indian Contract Act of 1872. That any contract has to conform to those things. Any contract should have those terminologies. So naturally, on the basis of general conditions of contract, every company, every government department defines its own conditions and puts those conditions in every contract. Every contract. These are very general terms applicable in all the contracts. These are standard conditions set by the procuring or contracting organization, and that apply to all the contracts done by the organization. In the next slide, we will see what can be those general conditions of contract. And then there are some special conditions of contract, SCC. It is usually there together with the general conditions of contract in any contract. It is always to be read in conjunction with the general conditions of the contract, but they are specific to the contract being done. No two contracts are same. And we have to carry out every year, say 500 contracts, big and small. So all the contracts will not have all the terms. If somebody is going to construct a building, and if somebody is going to construct a metro, obviously the contracts are different. For metro, the contract will be different. For building a house, the contract will be different. So those terms which are used only for constructing a house, they will be called as special conditions of that contract. And those terms which will be required for constructing a big metro project, those terms will be special conditions of contract for the metro project. But the general conditions of contract can remain same in both the things, both the places. Now, what is important here is that both these things are found in the contract, yet in some places where there may arise certain situations where GCC is at variance with any provisions of the special conditions of contract. First, we have got GCC and SCC in the same contract, in every contract, but due to certain reasons, GCC is at variance with any provisions of the SCC. In that case, the provision of SCC will prevail. It is very clearly written in the contract that at the end, the special conditions of the contract shall only prevail over GCC if the two have some contradiction somewhere. Okay, that is why I thought it fit to say what is general conditions of contract and what is the special conditions of contract. Next, let's come. What are usually those general conditions of contract which are found to be in every contract? Scope of facilities, of course, scope will be different, but this heading will be there. These are generally the headings which are kept in every contract. Completion time will be there. Contractor's responsibilities will be there. Employer's responsibilities will be there. Payment terms, taxes and duties will be there. All these things will be there. But the special conditions of contract will be there in all these things. And depending upon certain situations, the special conditions of contract may be overriding the general conditions of contract. That is the difference between these two conditions. What are the special conditions of contract? Again, scope facilities, completion time, payment terms. See, these are general in every contract, but in the special conditions, the scope facility has to be different for different contracts, and that is special condition. Completion time has to be different for different contract. This is a special condition. Payment term, special condition. Work execution, a special condition. Test inspection procedure, special condition. Similarly, guarantees and liabilities, special conditions. So despite of the fact that these are also general conditions of contract, for a particular contract, they become special. And accordingly, it has to be treated. So these were the general terms of contract and special terms of special conditions of contract. Now, let's come to main thing, which is contract execution or management. The whole topic is about contract, is on contract management, but we have already dealt with so many things in the past. The concept has already been cleared. Now, when the contract starts, how do you manage? I mean, when the contract gets under execution, everything starts, then how do you manage? So what is done is, I will just read it. There's nothing to be, explained here. Contract details are to be checked by executing authority. Let me say who is executing authority. We said that contractor has to specify his nominee who will be in touch with the employer. A person has to be nominated by the contractor. Similarly, the employer also has to nominate a person called executing authority. Mr. So-and-so, our deputy general manager or our general manager in charge of this department will be the executing authority of this contract. Why? Because when the contract gets under execution, then it is the job of this executive authority to see that everything is happening as per the contract. Not only that, this executing authority will recommend the payment to the contractor depending upon the payment terms. So he is the most important person from my side. For my company, for this contract, he is the most important person. He is in touch with the contractor's nominee all the time. The two will execute the entire project. They are responsible from either side. So contract details, whatever has been done in the contract document will be checked by this executing authority. And if he finds any discrepancy may arise. Some points may get, there may be typographical error, there may be some error even after checking and rechecking. So this executing authority will go through the entire contract document. And if he thinks that there are any discrepancy, then he'll immediately inform it to the contract cell. I mean, that agency which has done this contract with the party. And therefore, after that, if it is found to be correct, that yes, executing authority, what he's saying is correct, then there may be some amendment to the contract. So that is why the first job of the executing authority is to check the details. And that is how the contract execution starts. Then the executing authority, or say the two organizations, will have a kick-off meeting with the contractor. The contractor will be called, and we all will sit and we'll discuss the contract. We'll exchange some views, when you are going to start, how you're going to start, and so many things are done. So this is called kick-off meeting with the contractor. It is necessary. Then, as I said, nomination of the representative. The executing authority is the nominated representative of the employer, whereas the contractor will nominate his person. Protocol of the activities to be duly signed. Billing schedule to be frozen and approved. Billing schedule is already given in the contract, but still they are to be accepted by both the parties, because there may be slight changes in the schedule or on mutual agreement there also. Very minor, negligible, but this has to be done. That billing schedule has to be frozen and approved. That you will raise the bill like this and will make the payment like this. Backup documents for liquidated damage. This is liquidated damage to be maintained. I hope you know about the liquidated damage. Liquidated damage is that damage which is perceived by the employer as a loss which has occurred because of delay in execution of the project. And this is very well written in the contract document, that if the project is delayed beyond 1 week, 2 weeks, then we will be charging you at the rate of say 1%, 0.5% per week or per month. We will be deducting from your contract value. I mean, we will be deducting 1% of the total contract value if there is a delay of say 1 month. I mean, this has to be decided. This has to be agreed, but this forms the part of the contract. This cannot be changed once contract has been signed. And for that, the contractor, the employer's people will have to keep all backup documents to prove that there was a delay on the part of the contractor, because delay can also be on the part of the employer. In the scope, I was supposed as an employer to clear your drawings, but I took a lot of time in clearing the drawings. So the delay is on my part, and it happens. It's a very regular kind of a thing. Therefore, if I have to prove that the delay is on the part of the contractor, then I have to have backup documents for that. This is very important activity. Timely follow for delivery, inspection and clearance, PSC, as I said, preliminary acceptance test, final acceptance test. All these things will go on till the end of the execution of the contract. Commercial issues to be referred to contract sale again. If there are certain commercial issues, the contracting agency will come into play. This all happens during the execution of a contract, and this is how it is managed. It continues. No additional supply or job or alteration to scope shall be allowed during execution. Let us be very clear about it. Sometimes it does happen that even with the best of engineering mind, something has got missed during the time of contracting. But normally we say that those things we will completely ignore during the execution time. Although it does not happen, sometimes some modification has to be done, for which both the parties have to mutually agree. But yes, no additional supply, job alteration to scope shall be allowed during execution. That is one point where both the parties have to be very, very strict and strong. Cooperation with other contractors. Okay, when you are working, you have to cooperate. Each one has to cooperate with the other one. Work program has to be made. Progress report has to be made. Even they can decide on what progress report they will monitor jointly, separately, something like that. Progress of performance, manpower requirement for operation, maintenance of facilities, training. All these things come under the heading of contract execution. Next, will there be any subcontracting? Of course, if there is a subcontracting, the contractor will be asking for our permission, which has to be given. Design engineering as to who will do. All these things are in the contract, but design engineering has to be cleared. Codes and standards have to be firmed up and then cleared, approved, approval, review of technical document by engineer, consultant, civil engineering work, who will do and how it is being done, who is going to monitor, structural load test will be done. I mean, these are all the points which come under the execution of the contract, and that is how the contract is managed. Import license and export license, yes, a lot of things, a lot of time is taken in these things. Packing, transportation, customs clearance, installation, labor and labor rules, compliance with the statutory laws and other regulations of government, local authority, site regulations and safety. Then erection of the facilities, emergency work, site clearance, test and inspection, preliminary acceptance, commissioning, performance guarantee test, final acceptance. All these things up to final acceptance test, you are saying, all these activities which just I read out just like that, they come under contract execution, or you call it contract management. Both are same. These are the activities, and besides these important activities, so many other activities might be there which will require strict monitoring, and that comes under contract management. I think the concept is very clear now. But anyone, if you have got any question, we will come to that question afterwards. Now, this basically brings an end to this topic of contract management. But let me also go a step further, as we went yesterday, and see what is your role? What for this session? Why you people have devoted so much of time yesterday and today? What is your learning? What is your take? So you have got a big stake over here after the job is completed, or even if the job is continuing, it is incomplete, yet to be completed. So you come into the picture. When you come for the audit as per your audit schedule, then 2-3 fundamentals have to be kept in mind by auditors. First, the responsibility of conclusion of contracts for works to be done and supplies to be made and of enforcing them rests with the executive. Rests with the executive means that executing authority. Contract execution of the first point was contract details to be checked by executing authority. This is the person nominated by the employer. He is the person responsible for execution of the entire contract. He may be having a big department under him, and his entire department must be engaged in executing that project, that management, that contract. But being the head of the department and nominated by the employer to be the executing authority on behalf of the organization, he is the person who is responsible and accountable also for the entire execution of the project or that contract or whatever you call. So that is why when you go for audit, you have to know who is the executing authority, because that executive is responsible for everything, and you have to question him for anything which comes to your mind, or any lacuna that you might be seeing. Then scrutiny of these contracts or agreements constitutes one of the important functions of audit. You will ask for the contract file, naturally very bulky file, maybe in 4, 5, 10 volumes. So you have to scrutiny those contracts, those files, and then see what was the contract, what was agreed to, how the things have gone on since then. These are the scope of work for you. You have to do it as an auditor. The objective of such a scrutiny is to see whether the contracts or agreements have led to loss or wastage of public money, and also to ensure that the rules and regulations provide reasonable security against malpractices. Not needed to be explained. There's no need to explain it further. You know all these things. Why are you doing scrutiny? You have to see whether the contracts or agreements have led to loss or wastage of public money. See, what happens usually is that you see how much time it has taken to complete the project, or why the project is not getting completed, why there's delay. Every delay is a loss to the organization, tangibly and intangibly. Tangibly in the sense that had this been there on time, we would have started making the profit. If it is not there, it has taken 1 year further, then we have lost the opportunity. It is called an opportunity loss of opportunity cost or whatever. So naturally, an audit will ask these questions. These are the questions for the audit. So, but these are the one of the main points which the auditor usually sees. But otherwise, the checklist is pretty long, and it depends entirely upon you as to what you are going to audit. At times, you come to audit with a theme. One theme may be the delays in execution of the projects or contracts. So you see everything from that perspective only. But anyway, I have tried to compile. These are the points which we discussed yesterday also. In the second session, during procurement procedure and government, we had discussed this contract audit checklist, procurement audit checklist. Same things are here in the name of contract audit checklist. There's no difference. I think some 12, 13, 14 points we made yesterday, we discussed. So all those points are there and with you, but I will take 5 minutes just to read it out. It's already on your screen. So let me just read it out. Whether the work plans and annual contract plans prepared and displayed, whether the contractor work was done as per the work plan, whether the method adopted for work and all these steps as per the procurement policy we are taken. I mean, every organization has got certain policy. Whether the tender committee, evaluation committee was constituted and involved in the contract procedure. Then whether the overall contract was executed within a reasonable time. This is the most important question that you ask. Most important question, because if an organization executes say 10 contracts in a year, I will be surprised if somebody says that all the contracts were completed on time. This time lag, this time overrun is something which becomes just unavoidable at times for so many reasons, hundreds of reasons. But it happens. And this is a big thing for the auditors. You have to ask this question and you have to find out the reason for that. So whether there was any avoidable delay at any stage of the contract process, whether the necessary approval was taken from appropriate authority where required. This is always there in a government sector. Whether proper and adequate documents were maintained, whether the pre-qualification screening for issue of tender documents was done properly and in a fair manner, whether the technical and financial evaluation was done properly and in a fair manner. All these questions you know. I'm just going, trying to cover it up here. Whether the contractor firm supplied the goods or executed the work as per the quality, quantity, and price indicated in the contract, agreement, or supply order. Whether the goods were supplied or works executed in time and properly recorded in measurement books and stock works registers after inspection. See, I have found auditors asking for measurement books and stock or works register. This basically is a logbook where the jobs are logged in terms of days, in terms of weeks, in terms of months. And this is the basic document which the auditors want to come to know whether the things have got delayed or not. And this also gives the reason as to why there was a delay. So measurement books and stock works registers are very, very important from your point of view, auditor's point of view. Then lastly, whether the payment was made to the supplier contractor within the time frames indicated in the contracts. If not, then reasons for delay for this also. Yes, the payment has to be made on time. Yesterday we discussed about fairness. So if you are fair, then you have to be fair with everybody. You have to be fair with contractors, with suppliers. And therefore, you have to ensure that after they have done their obligation, their part of obligation is over, then you also ensure that your obligation is fulfilled nicely. Don't delay the payment unnecessarily. That brings bad reputation to your company, your firm, that you are very poor paymasters. काम कर दिया, पैसा नहीं देता है. Something like that. So whether the EMDs and securities were returned within the time frames indicated in the contracts, if not, then reasons for delay. So gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this session. We have, I'm not summing up here, but we definitely have seen about definition of contract, types of contract, contract management definition, then contracting procedure, important terms and definitions, general conditions or special conditions in contracts, contract execution management, and contract audit done by you. So my job very broadly is over, and thank you very much for having a very patient hearing. Have a nice time. But now, if anybody has got any question, I'm here to answer. Please ask.
It was very good session, sir. Hello.
But this is not a question.
No, sir, yeah, I know.
I want question from you.
सर स्मॉल डाउट सर,
बोलिए yes.
ये आपने अभी भी बताया था कि स्पेशल कंडीशंस प्रिवेल ओवर जनरल कंडीशंस, वो इज इट ए जनरल रूल और आई मीन मेंशन हैज टू बी मेड इन द एग्रीमेंट?
This is mentioned in the contracts.
It has to be mentioned in the contract.
Yes, very much. This has to be mentioned in the contracts that if GCC and SCC are at variance, then SCC will prevail over GCC.
Okay, thank you.
This is a rule. और ये ठीक है, आप एनीबडी अगर इंग्लिश नहीं हिंदी में पूछे कोई दिक्कत नहीं. आप ऐसा कभी कभी होता है कि थोड़ा लैंग्वेज बैरियर हो जाता है, कि क्या करें, हम लोग को बोलना पड़ता है. नो क्वेश्चन. आप हिंदी इंग्लिश जिसमें चाहे पूछे, थोड़ा सवाल जवाब हो जाए. अभी टाइम है भी. Any other question, please? अरे आप लोग ऑडिटर है भाई. You people are auditors. When you go there, you ask lot many questions, and you are not asking any question right now. I have faced you people for almost 20 years. And even after my retirement from my company, our relationship continues in this form, that we are discussing those things even today. Of course, on a different platform. Please ask questions. Go ahead. किन्हीं को कोई कंफ्यूजन हो तो कृपया पूछे.